Hi, I'm Phil Rude, and this is 100 Days of Making Comics, days 31, 32, and 33. Typically, I am sitting here rambling to myself, but today I thought I would bring in a guest. My guest today is Michael Haase. He curates the Tall Tales Told. Would you call it a blog?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Or a
Um,
website. It's a collection of short writings.
yeah, kind of
He
like embellished memoir sort of thing.
Sure, it's good times. It's Gonzo Light, we'll call it.
Sure.
He curates the writing block groups on Facebook and Twitter, and he is a contributor to the recent writing block anthology called Escape, now available on Amazon and just arrived on my front door this morning. So, Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And did I miss anything?
No, I think that's enough for now.
And
My
much
cup
more
over
coming later.
my cup overfloweth, but it's all coming out later. That's plenty. But yeah, that's where I'm at, and yeah, Tall Tales Told is fun. I don't know what to call it, actually. I'm glad you brought that up because it's something to think about. I think it's mainly a blog, but I don't know. I've thought about combining some news with past experiences on cruise ships to kind of make a mishmash thing. So I don't know what that would be, but Gonzo could work. I like that.
Yeah, a little bit. You're in there. You're in the story, so it fits and it's embellished a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh, I have a similar. Mine is straight up fiction, but I have a similar like short story blog. It's just a WordPress blog, and as I kind of write uh, fake autobiographical stories, I kind of post them there, and sometimes it's more or less just an excuse to draw things.
Yeah, I really like. You had the one recently with what's the name of your monkey, piano
Oh,
playing monkey?
yeah, Darwin.
Yeah, Darwin woke you up in the middle of the night. Y'all
Yeah,
all had a jam session. That was awesome.
that was one I've kind of considered taking a little bit further and seeing if I could get a series out of it, but ultimately it was just sort of an idea that I've had for a long time about trying to illustrate playing music, and sort of the challenges that go with that. And
You do great as a musician. That's really cool to watch. And he's got style.
it was it was a good time. It was a interesting way to do it, and it just kind of scratched that itch. So yeah, for now, I just decided I think I've done what I need to do with that sort of set of characters, and I may come back around later. But yeah, for now, I'm just hanging it up, and that is going to be my awkward segue into our topic today. I try to on these videos talk about topics that not just relate to drawing and making comics, but that sort of apply to any kind of creative work that people are doing. And today I want to talk about quitting a project. Uh, is it appropriate to quit? When is it appropriate to quit? Is it okay to hang it up? And so, Michael, that's part of the reason I wanted to have you on here. You had a recent experience where you sort of pulled the plug, or at least put a project on the shelf, of doing other things. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Oh no,
Uh,
no, actually that's well
so,
stated. Actually,
yeah, I'll let you take it if you want to talk about your experience with that.
well, basically, yeah. I mean, I figuring out where to start, I guess, is really tough because that project itself was 3 years kind of in the making. And that was a book that had two different, I mean, I think the symptoms present themselves once I start describing the project.
Right.
Because I've written, I mean, obviously I write a lot and I've written a lot of other things. I go into everything from little stand-up comedy bits to children's picture book manuscripts, and so I think I would, for the next anthology that we're putting together, my idea is for a horror story. So I'm all over the place, but the the idea was that I had this book, and it's what's interesting is that I did use ink shares, and of course, to preempt all this, I have nothing bad to say about ink shares because the decision was all about me, and as it should be,
Right.
narcissistic statement of the year. But
Just real quick, for everyone who doesn't know, Inkshares is they're a newer publisher, and their selections of who to publish is based partially on like crowdsourcing,
yeah,
crowdfunding kind of pre-sales, I guess, is sort of the easiest way to put it.
yeah, and that's a lot of it, and I think they're converting to even choosing their own manuscripts, which actually I think is a really appropriate move for them too, because I think they, that a lot of what, well, I mean, that's just it. I think from the time 3 years ago when I first started a book that was called The Madness of Mr. Butler, um, to now, I don't know what's like. There's been a lot of shifts in that company as well as a lot of shifts in my manuscript. Um, but the idea was originally in 2016. I had written a few novels, and I was still kind of gearing up a lot of my confidence. I would definitely say
Right.
back then um, I was enjoying writing immensely, but I wasn't branching out to communities or anything like that. I wasn't expanding my knowledge base or getting involved socially with all the different platforms that exist now. So I was a writer, and I was showing my stuff to friends and family, and they all seemed to really dig it, and I was digging it. And so what happened was I hadn't even heard of Inkshares. My sister heard about it on the Nerdist podcast, I think,
Okay.
because they sponsored that contest. And so she just said, "Hey, there's this contest you can enter. You can just put your book up, and like you said, it's crowdfunding, pre-sales, and top three with the most pre-sales.
Right.
You get a publishing deal." So it just kind of went, okay.
Right.
And the theme was space opera, of which I did not have a manuscript. But the selling point to me was reading through all the stuff. It said you didn't have to have a manuscript, and it had a place to put up chapters, and it had a place to kind of keep updating your writing. So it was this very big motivational thing. So basically, you could go through and write a chapter, put it up, have everybody read it, get back to you, use that to decide whether or not to pre-order your novel, and go from there. So it was,
And there's some accountability in doing it.
yeah, it
You,
was
you
very
know,
attractive.
it's there's some motivation built into that.
Yeah. So actually getting to see, if anything, like I went from like doing all this kind of in my basement at my desk to, okay, let's put up some live raw material up and see what people think about it.
Right.
So it was really just me kind of stripping away a lot of my own shyness toward the industry and considering myself, I mean, really a real writer. Um, I think that's something a lot of artists in general can struggle with, is actually going out and saying, like, introducing yourself as a writer is something
Oh,
I've
for
only
sure.
done in the last year, even though I've been writing for years and years and years.
I still
Um,
struggle with telling people I'm an artist or I'm a cartoonist. Like it's when you still have a day job, you kind of go,
yeah,
well, am I really? Yeah, it's a semantic thing kind of at a
yeah,
certain point. But yeah, I get it.
yeah. For whatever reason, you feel like people are going to call you out, like
Right. Oh, totally. Yeah.
either, either that or the opposite, like kind of go, well, you only have one book, like, or oh wow, you're a writer. Oh my God, I can't.
Oh yeah,
So
draw me something. Yeah.
when are you gonna quit your job? And yeah, as I said, people asking me to write them poems. And
Oh wow, that Stephen King makes a lot of money, huh? You're probably gonna be rich.
exactly. And it's like at its base, point, what you are, and what I am as a writer. It's not something I could give up.
Sure.
It's just something. It's something I do. Um,
Something you will do regardless.
yeah. So, um, yeah. And so actually having that platform there, and suddenly like people are throwing money at it, was just blowing my mind. but I got a lot of compliments, and I actually went up the board pretty quickly. And next thing I know, I was going through that process allowed me to convert myself into realizing there are more facets to being successful as a writer than just writing. As unfortunate as that sounds, that I actually had to think of marketing. I had to think of telling people I'm a writer, and yes, I'm writing a book, and yes, I for real, I'm writing a book, and would you please throw $10 at it?
Asking people to support it, and
yeah. And so people would flock to the Inkshares thing, and so there were a lot of writers just kind of meeting in this area, and it was really cool. I mean, I met a lot of people. Obviously, with that kind of open-ended thing, there's a lot of levels of interaction, a lot of levels of ability. So there was a lot of, I think, they have thousands and thousands and thousands of users if you really kind of just start, down the rabbit hole.
Right.
And it's been that way. Now, when I got started with that contest, and I was second, the top 3 got publishing deals, and I was second. And so I got it, and it was amazing. And back then, it was a different structure. It was a different CEO even, and all this stuff. But it was very book heavy. And the way the company was structured, in hindsight, of course, they had to change. They were giving away like $10 worth of credits just for signing up. And then, like, if you recommended your book and somebody clicked that to link to buy your book, then you would get $10 in credits.
There was a lot of referral.
It was
goodwill going around.
Yeah, there was. So you get to be friends with people, but just like sneakily trade. Like, yeah, you click my book, and then then I'll get the $10, and I'll use that $10 credits to buy your book. And there was all sorts of like behind the scenes trading and stuff. And I can't say I didn't do that sometimes, but I also did have a lot of like friends and family. It's not like I'm gonna get my stepmother to do that shit. So, friends from high school and stuff, like, oh, you want to get in on a pyramid scheme? And it's not really like
it's
a
the Amway
thing. So especially when you're like not feeling like a legitimate writer yet, to actually like try to go about it illegitimately feels kind of satanic.
There's just always something a little ooky about, I mean, and all of us sort of, I mean, we're not all on the same level, but when we're all starting out, I feel like there's a point where it's like your mom will buy your stuff and this and that, but at a certain point, you're all just buying stuff from each other, the friends you've made in your artist community, and so everybody's just breaking even because it's swaps, and it's sort of
oh, definitely.
It's I don't like the term, but it fits. People call it say it's very incestuous, like it's all within this community. Like
that's a fair way of saying it.
And it's so you feel like you're getting somewhere and not getting somewhere at the same time, because really you're just sort of trading likes back and forth.
Yeah, that's very true. That's yeah. Despite the the imagery of the analogy, incestuous is actually quite accurate.
It does some weird stuff to your psyche when you just realize, oh, I'm just selling this thing to someone who's buying my thing, or I'm buying their thing, and it's just a swap at the end of the day. Not that, I mean, it's bigger than that, but on certain levels, it just sort of makes you question, am I getting anywhere? We're getting off topic here because I'm rambling, but
that's all right.
Yeah, I know what you mean about like I got put on so many authors, friendly. So many authors reached out and friended me. You follow me, I'm doing this. I'll follow you. And I didn't have a project on Inkshares, but just being on Inkshares, it was like I got spam levels of email from notifications.
They were authors. They've fixed it since, but yeah, back then it was like there were some terrible emails. I think
Yeah.
I,
It was a
it's
lot.
because people were getting refunds for my project, and I tried to go through every channel I could. Like I even made a newsletter just to be like, you guys, I know you've been ignoring these for probably 2+ years. You might be getting some money back, but you should make up your stuff to make sure that it's updated. How can I tell everybody?
Right.
Because I think a lot of people abandoned ship with that initial way that they would auto email people. But anyway, long story short, I mean, it's a legitimate publisher with distribution, and they
Sure.
get people reviews. They get books in front of possible places to sell intellectual property for movies and TV and audiobooks and all this stuff. So there was reason for the buzz and the hum. So it was, but at the same time, what was great was that it actually it got me to focus on this book, and it got me to just kind of really nail down, because I wanted to give people something back. I even created like a blog that was a diary of the guy who was the main character, but that part was aside from the book, just to kind of prove how often I write, and that I'm willing to be as productive as possible.
Sure.
And so I got really heavy into the book, and so it was great. But when I won, the manuscript wasn't finished, so I had to finish the manuscript. Life kind of got in the way. That's for good reasons, because then my son was born. So only you aren't going to like abandon your actual paying job if you have to make time for a newborn who's going to be up all night. So,
Sure. Yeah.
so a lot of that book, so that kind of went downhill for a few months, and then I finally got it up, and really full disclosure, I write some weird stuff, and I certainly, when I first started that project, still had a lot to learn about what other people might actually like. I mean, the first manuscript I turned in was at the end of that year. I turned it in December, um, and it was a full finished manuscript. It needed editing, but that's what they provided. So it was
Right.
like, okay, sweet, this is done. What had happened in between then and then, because one of that contest was the way that was back when you had the impression, which was not incorrect, that Inkshares would just take your book, send it to an outside editing company. They wouldn't developmentally edit it really, or you could reject pretty much all of their suggestions, and then they'd send it back to Inkshares. Inkshares would print it and try to sell it. So it was like a very quick turnover. But obviously, quick turnover of lots of books when there's credits being tossed around everywhere wasn't a very viable way of conducting business.
Right.
So they had a big change in the summer of 2016, like change CEOs and everything like that, and they got rid of the outside editing group. So next thing I know, I'm up with their new head of editing, and so I get a phone call with him. And he, what I had written was kind of kind of weird in places. He pointed out some good things, but and I think he went through and did some very basic suggestions. But ultimately, this phone call was really kind of defeating, because obviously they had to protect their business and come up with something that would be like making up for all the holes. So very basically, I got the impression was, are you willing to just write something different? That's like, oh, okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
And it's like it's not that they said they wouldn't produce the book as it is, but it was just like, monster changes. It was basically just like, do you want to write something different, or do you want me to tell you why you should write something different? It was
They
just
wanted
kind of
something. Did
they
you
needed
feel
to
like
sell
they wanted
something.
something safer,
Yeah.
something that was a
Oh, sure.
little
Yeah.
sure?
And to this day, I think they probably make. I can't speak for it, of course. It's not my company, but I think to this day they still, make a decent penny from, and make up for a lot of losses, even probably from that time from selling the intellectual property. So at that time, uh, my story was taking place on a distant planet with two kids running into their old ghost grandfather and him taking them back in time.
I don't. I don't think there's anything risky at all about that. That sounds like everything.
Yeah, so it was weird. It had its it was fun. I enjoy it, but I can't say my tastes are universal at all.
But I can also say that as a science fiction fan and seeing his ink shares, I think predominantly, at least when I was following them more, was doing genre fiction, fantasy and sci-fi. That does not sound so far out of the realm of something you would read in a science fiction book. You know what I mean? Like that sounds like I'll pick that up. That's no problem at all.
Yeah, but I think it had problems with it that were kind of more like I'm still transitional as like a more polished writer because this is still the first thing I'm putting in front of people. So there were valid complaints, and I don't think I was not nearly as confident as I am now. So I was just kind of like, oh, okay, I'll rewrite it. And so I actually came up with an entirely different structure, and then but then I think they realized they had a bunch of us, these less experienced writers, coming in and having these stories that they really needed to kind of reshape to make it something that would keep a good viable business with books getting good reviews. And they had a focus, obviously. So they put a few of us into like a class of sorts, like an online class where we were going through step by step, like character building and everything like that.
Okay.
So that was cool. So from there I was basically building the book again from the ground up. So I already had one manuscript and now I'm building another. And then as is apt to do this time, life happened again, but this time we lost my father-in-law. So that was just a whole nother right in the middle of it, okay. And then so things trailed off for another couple months on that, and then I got my mojo back, and I got and what was cool was this time around when I was finished with the manuscript, I actually was able to, I had friends I built up. What I had established, and one of the great positive things with Inkshares was that I had this community of people, and friends, and we were exchanging each other's work and commenting, critiquing on each other's work and trying to build it to be stronger. And so I passed it through several people and got everything together and got this manuscript, and it felt good. It was funny in a lot of places, still weird. So, but this one was instead about, in this case, it was Mr. Butler actually flies a Victorian house in outer space, and he can actually use it to miniaturize planets.
Once again, not weird at all.
So
very mainstream.
But at least this time they knew ahead of time that was coming their way, because I going through the class.
Dude, that is a selling point. You want to tell people that's what your book is about.
Yeah. So
if you want me to pick up your book, tell me it's about that.
So I'd actually put it through, we had to do log lines, to pitch the book, and we had to do a summary. We had to do character summaries. We had to do, and I did a basic outline, and then I had a chapter by chapter outline. So it was all built up, and it was just fill in the blanks at that point, which is makes it really easy to write. So I was actually really excited, and I even got it through and gave it to friends. They gave me comments, and I made all the changes and all that stuff. And I've never been afraid to just rip chunks out of my book. I know there's a lot of writers who are afraid of kill your darlings and things like that. But I don't know. I've learned that if it improves it, then sorry, paragraph, you got to go.
It's necessary sometimes.
Yeah. So it was a really cool experience, and I was using my community and everything like that. And so I turned that in. Once again, it was I think it was last January or February that I turned that in. So we're hitting the 2-year mark since I won the contest. But it's the second completely different manuscript, similar character names, different manuscript.
And at this point, you have people who have paid for this book 2 years prior.
Yeah.
Right.
297 technically was the tally. So, and that's a lot. And of course, at this time, I've still got people, and that was part of the problem happening in the background is that, you've got these people who you've shamelessly hounded to say, please back me. Cool things are going to happen for me if I win this contest. This is going to be great. And then 2 years is coming, and you're trying to give up an update. And every time you update the book, somebody goes, "So where's my book?" Because essentially what you had promised them was a not unusual scenario was that they'd probably get the book by the end of the year 2016, because that's how quick these books were coming out back then. So I left the bad impression, but things had changed, and I don't know. That's just how it goes. So I turned in the manuscript and felt really good about it. And I think like 3 weeks later, I got feedback back. And in this case, it was really odd because there was some good valid points, but what I had was feedback that basically was just kind of, it was supposed to be a developmental edit. I'm getting line edit suggestions mixed with other random things, but the problem I had was that the feedback ended after page 60. I got this long letter basically telling me all the things that were wrong with the manuscript. Some of it really worthwhile feedback, some of it clearly objective. Obviously, the editor and I had very different senses of humor in a lot of ways, which is going to be a issue anyway.
That's a tough hill. That's a tough hill to get over.
Yeah, especially with
taste.
humor, because you're expecting like an outward reaction from people, and it's so easy to tell people they're not funny. It's like
right.
But it just depends on what group you're getting it to. So I did have a weird book, but I remember it just left me with a really bad taste in my mouth because the feedback itself was for not even a quarter of the book, and it was just like, so all of everything I got back was basically telling me going through, rewrite the whole thing line by line and take this big section out. I would say I couldn't make and it was basically I couldn't make a single poop joke apparently, because those are gross. and it was odd because like there were things like a lot of it, the main characters in ER nurse, and so there's scenes in an emergency room, and like the editor didn't know what a call light was. So I was like, so you've never been in a hospital? Okay.
Lucky guy. Yeah.
I was like, that's cool. But, so that's what I came out with it. So it just kind of left me with like, okay, there's some good things to take away from this, but ultimately, are you the editor for me?
It felt nitpicky.
It just felt like a completely difference in opinion. I don't know what, and there was no way to battle it, because this was the only editor available. So
if I can interrupt real quick.
Absolutely.
At the time that you got on board with Inkshares, and this is what it always struck me as, totally from the outside. I've never worked with them. Mm-hmm. I don't know firsthand, but they seem like sort of at the beginning, sort of a glorified self-publisher. That they took the self-publishing of like CreateSpace through Amazon, and they mixed it with Kickstarter, and they just kind of said anyone can publish here if they get the sales.
And I think that was Sorry, go on.
It just seems like that is something that worked for them initially. The first handful of books I got from Inkshares, I'm not going to lie and say that I finished all of them, because some of them that got the sales and got published, I think were very poorly written. They were written by people who are not traditional authors. So I think they ran into issue. It sounds like they ran into issue with that, and then overcorrected and over edited some really interesting concepts. But I to their credit, it sounds like they also kind of mentored uh, new authors too, like having you guys take a class like that. I think that's really cool that a publisher would go, these people are on the right track, just need a little fine tuning, and we're going to help out with that. And I think that sounds like a really positive experience with them.
Yeah, and I think that's actually where they're leaning to. I know they before I left, they were showing me this program they're going to start called Incubator, with a K for the ink.
Right.
Clever. And that's essentially the idea. And and I totally get that. I think that's actually a really cool program. I thought the cohort thing was a really cool program. Where I felt at a dead end was I was sitting on an editor that I didn't really think I saw eye to eye with, which was odd. So that's where I sat, and that was the first time I was like, and I did end up having a phone call with them, and they talked me down off the ledge, but just basically said, yeah, there's a new editor. Yeah, that's your editor, or the CEO offered to edit with me too.
So can we fast forward up to what happened just has it been a few days ago now?
Yeah. I think actually refunds just went out today.
You've had some editing issues and you've had some manuscript issues,
mm-hmm.
And it's been 2+ years at this point, right?
Yeah. Well, we're rounding year 3 now.
Coming into year 3.
This time 3 years ago was when the contest was in full swing for at least a week. So, but yeah, I mean, but then and that was just it. It was just like, it was hard to get my feet back under me after that for a little bit, because it was just kind of like budging against a large stone. And so I still had the manuscript. I still worked with it, and I actually was I kind of going back to the drawing board and even coming up with almost an all new story. And so the symptoms kept coming up, just regards to this project. It had been my focus and a lot of my drive. And so I was coming up, and it's year 3, and I'm still getting people going, where's my book? And since then I had started a company. I had published another book. I had other things going on. I'm starting to get in line with, and when I started writing block this past year, and we did this whole project with the anthology, I think that's what finally kind of made things click for me, was that I've got this project, as much as I love it, has a problem that's affecting the rest of everything. And I think that's where the core of it was that it's not really so much about, letting the project go as it is just freeing up the space. Because having a drive to create things and have people get interested in them and talk about it enthusiastically and get into people's, actually speak to people and say, I am a writer and I'm good at it. It's different to say that when you're running a business, you're releasing anthologies, you have other things you're producing on the way, instead of that plus, almost 300 people going, where's my book?
Right.
And so, I mean, it felt like such a weight. And I even put out a survey just to kind of see how people were gauging the idea. And one of my questions was just like, does the fact that I still have this other book hanging prevent you from possibly being interested in or buying anything else I work on from here on out? And there were a lot of yeses. I was just like, that's a problem. And because seeing the project through to me is something that can still happen. It's not over.
Right.
It's just on my own terms now. And that's kind of, I guess a part of me did feel held hostage by the pre-order money involved. I'm shy with money anyway. It's not like, I've got like copies of this escape book in my car, and I was even like talking to somebody today about it, and they're like, oh yeah, I don't have money on me right now, but I'd love to read it. So I just gave them the book, and I'm like,
right. I have given away far more books than I've sold.
Okay,
Yeah.
read it then. Just read it. Just read it.
Please, yes.
Don't. If you think to remember to give me the money, then okay, cool. But just read it, please. Just read it. I have something. Just read it. So the idea of the opposite being true, that people had given their money and I've got nothing to give them. And the project itself, the way to remedy everything and come to create a book that was, I guess, up to Inkshare's standards, which have certainly been raised since I first met them. Because I agree about the books, and I think they, of course, made a lot of moves that were essential for their business thriving.
Sure, they're growing.
So it's, but being involved in that, it felt like a sacrifice on everything else I needed to do. A fair analogy, since we're hitting gross and strange analogies, would be constipation. Just feeling artistically constipated.
It's the cheese in your writer's gut.
Exactly.
It's the block of cheese you shouldn't have eaten. I just want to focus on sort of a big picture. I really appreciate you sharing your story up to this point. But just I really want to hammer on the idea that sometimes quitting is the right, we hear it all the time as Americans. We've heard it our entire lives. Never quit. It's almost like it's an adversarial attitude, kind of, like never give up, like you're battling something, like a physical being that you're battling. And if you quit, it's going to kill you. Like it's this real locked in combat kind of thing. But the reality of some projects are just like some jobs or some relationships. They can become toxic to you. And it's really unhealthy to not quit them at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think we've all sort of hung up projects or had big ambition for things. I know I've started things and gotten a little ways in and just gone, this thing is driving me crazy. I'm not enjoying it anymore. I have other things I want to move on to. And it becomes consuming. I've quit clients and refunded money to them who have hired me for freelance work because the job ends up being not what I signed on for. I'm not going to throw people under the bus here, but I had a really big client early on that, well, I mean, big by my standards. He offered me more money than I'd ever seen before. Pretty much, yeah. Like like big picture, it was not huge for what was required, but he nitpicked every drawing, and after a month, I had gotten 3 out of an insane number actually finished. And it was like, this is never going to end. And I kept trying to move things along. And finally, I said, I'm going to refund your money, your initial payment, because it wasn't that I objected to doing the work. It was that it had become so stressful and so all-consuming. It was all I did when I wasn't at my day job or sleep. And it was so frustrating to constantly be going back and doing changes and reworking things that I had thought I had finished. And it became really unhealthy. And when I quit, he offered me more money. And I just said, no, it's too unhealthy for me to work like this. And I think sometimes the best thing as creators that we can do for ourselves and for our sanity and for our creativity in general is to pull the plug on a project before you end up hating your craft altogether.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that as it applies? Does any of that apply to?
Oh, totally.
Your novel up to this point?
Yeah, and it's probably something similar because, I gave you the brief description of both of the manuscripts I wrote, and you know what? I mean, Inkshares has to, and I think they're doing a better job existing more as a traditional publisher now. But I was caught up in this, kind of transitional period. And so I don't blame them or anything like that. I think honestly what I had done was, if I had submitted either manuscript to them as a traditional publisher, I would have just gotten the normal, like, thanks but no thanks. like like it was, the notes weren't like invalid. It was just a change of opinion. And I write weird stuff sometimes, and that's okay. That's how I jive. So I guess it's the same thing. It's just like I wouldn't use the same analogy as the experience you had with that one client, but I guess I could have done what they wanted. I could have. I even started constructing a story, and I think that was part of my deciding factors. I was constructing a story that was actually, it was good. It was better. It was improved. I was using the things that they had taught me, and the tools that I had been given. But it was just like there was still like just this air of just hauling a ball and chain along with it.
Sure.
And I think a lot of that was even just rooted in pre-order money. Honestly, I felt like I was taking all of my potential first fans that, I'd gone from this, like, I'm keeping all my writing to myself, to, hey, can I have $10? Hey, can I have $10? And all these people had supported me financially. And
I
what I
kind
had
of do
done,
that in my everyday life, by the way. I just walk around asking people for money.
So what I had done with my first time actually gathering a following and asking them for money was drag them along for what would probably end up being almost 5 years if I saw the whole thing through. And that was just like, oh, it was just adding this weight to the words. Like, was this all good enough? And I think every time I sat down, it was just like, this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. But the meantime, I have all these other books that I'm just enjoying. If I go to edit it, I'm having a blast. I'm making myself laugh. It's weird. It's crazy stuff. Some of it, like, and it all just started kind of digging out. I mean, I think I just naturally went, as soon as I kind of made the decision, somehow I just naturally gravitated to my, like, all things writing folder on my computer and just started digging. And suddenly I'm working on like several projects at once. And it's just so freeing. I mean, it was just, I've still got those 2 manuscripts that I worked on, and I think I'll come back to them, maybe self-publish them. I don't know. I probably have to, if that's if it's as
Right.
weird as everybody says, which is fine. But they do need polishing. um, but it was just so freeing. I mean, that's just it. It's so much about there's this other crazy person inside me that just is already unhealthy and unstable enough, and he's writing all my books. And if I keep him pinned down, it's just gonna get bad.
Sure. He's just inside you. Sure.
Yeah.
As
Yeah, exactly.
I like when you
My wife might
talked about
disagree.
I've seen your Christmas time Facebook photos from Walmart. I know that great.
It's my temporary graffiti is what I call that.
I like you talk about the guilt you felt about like taking money, and that's sort of making you beholden to the project. And I picture you picturing yourself as the monorail guy from The Simpsons who like takes all the money and leaves town. It's like, oh my God, I'm the villain of this story. I'm like this terrible person. When really it was just I mean, the reality of it is it's your first novel that you were doing publicly, and that you were.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if most of us look at our first things, they're not great. They're. I look back and am kind of embarrassed about things that I did 10, 12 years ago. And they did need polishing, and they probably weren't quite ready for the
Yeah.
big stage. But you really, it sounds like you've really like beat yourself up about it a lot more than I think you should. And the fact that you finally seem to have, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like it seems like you finally made peace with the decision to say, the best thing I can do for everybody here is to just walk away and get on to writing as a thing that I enjoy, as
Yeah,
opposed to this boat anchor around my neck that's just sucking the joy out of this whole craft, like,
yeah, without a doubt.
and I think that's a really healthy place to come out. I mean, career wise, are you gonna take a hit for it? Maybe, but that's part of the up and down of doing this long term. Is you're gonna take some hits. You're gonna if you don't do it this way, eventually you're gonna write something that somebody just doesn't like, and they go, "Well, you're not buying that." You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah,
just sort of you pick up readers, you lose readers, and that's I feel like just sort of an up and down thing of a long term career.
yeah. And it's, whether I like it or not, it's going to be long term. Like I'm just going to keep doing this. I don't envision one day it's just like I write a novel and I'm like, there it is. There it is. And I'm done.
And I'm done. Yeah.
It's like
You've reached that, and maybe I'll do a video on this in the future. The mythological "you made it" point. Like,
yeah.
oh, you made it. Oh,
Yeah.
well, where did I make it to? No, you made it.
Yeah.
You were successful.
Now, even if I somehow like I had some sort of hit and it's just like, it makes a movie and I'm suddenly like financially independent, I'm still gonna want to create, and it's still gonna have to be something I maintain, and I'm still gonna have to, keep that crazy man, whether inside or actually fully me, um, not pinned down or without the boat anchor around his neck as much as I can. Um, Now, even Stephen King, since we brought him up, I mean, you never know. You could end up, what was he saying? He was like doing how much cocaine and drinking how many Bud Lights and are locked up in a room while he was ending up with the Tommy knockers. It's like you just,
Right.
even with success, you still have to maintain yourself. And that's what it was about. I mean, if anything, it's just, it is a huge weight. It's freedom. I'm working on a lot more projects. I'm
Yeah.
working more happily.
Don't end up directing Maximum Overdrive, Michael.
Yeah,
Please
yeah.
take care of yourself.
I know. Oh, that face on that truck. It's in my
I can still
it's
see
in
it
my nightmares for the wrong reasons. Like
every
not the
time I
reason
hear
you
an
intended.
AC/DC song. Right there. But if you make your movie about a Victorian house in space, I do want you to get AC/DC to do the soundtrack.
I would love that. I think Axl Rose has to sing with them now, though. I think they lost.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the one guy
Wow.
lost his voice. I don't know why.
They're shuffling the cards of my childhood bands all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, I can play Back in Black, so maybe that's just it. I'll just do that.
Well, if you're running the show on that, I guess you'd be free to do that.
I'll just do it. Well, of course, that could be like my equivalent of Maximum Overdrive. Then can't take control of too many reins.
Write it, direct it, do a mountain of cocaine.
That's right.
You're golden. Yeah. I don't have a whole lot else to hit on. I basically made my point. Everybody quit your projects today. No, I think that is the fine line to walk, is to know when something is simply challenging that you have to work through, and when something is really draining you. And I think that's up to every individual to know when that is. But when it starts taking a toll on your mental health, I really think that is a point where you should consider whether or not this project is good for you. In some cases, I think it's possible for you to be facing that and go, all right, you know what? I'm just going to wrap this up as quick as I can, give them what they want, and get out and move on to something else. And in some cases, it's just, I think, appropriate to pull the plug on it. And I just think it's worthy of examination, as opposed to simply writing it off as winners never quit, or whatever trite sort of I'll call it what it is, trite bullshit you want to put on that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like sometimes hanging it up is appropriate, and that's where I'm going to land on it. Any final thoughts on
No,
this,
I mean
Michael?
that's good. I mean, give it a good 3 years, and you can know what's right for you.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, if I and it's not the only project I've ever hung up on. I think that's actually a lesson that I've been okay learning. I still have a book that it's precious to me. It's the first book I ever wrote, and it's in my basement, and it's in a box, and it's labeled "Do Not Open," because it's just so terrible.
Do not
But
open ever.
I finished it. It was like 75,000 words, and I was like, "This is awesome." And as soon as I started reading it, I'm like, "This is terrible."
I
So,
hope that when society collapses, somebody finds that box and it says "Do not open," and they're like, "It must be super important," and they open it up, and it's treated like the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's the foundation for the new morality. It's the new Bible of the next society. And
yeah, I'll go put it in a lead-lined suitcase now. I'm just gonna go make a trip to Samsonite and get this thing adjusted.
oh, that'd be great. All right, we're gonna wrap this up before we end up rambling all day. Michael, give
Yeah.
your Twitter handle or any links, anything you want to shout out. Go for it, man.
Okay. Twitter is at author Mike Haase, but that's Haase, so it's weird. Um, I, and I've got talltalestold.com, but it actually has two. If you'd rather type in themindofmichael.com, that also links to it. I haven't made a final decision on that. As you can tell, I'm scatterbrained. And that the writing community is writing block, but without the K, BLOC, and that's just a .com, and you can find it on Facebook or Twitter as well. Writing_block without the K, and that's where all my work is centralized now. And yeah, you can find out how to sign up for my newsletter and all that fun stuff. And that's as great as I am at self-promotion.
Hey, that'll do. I'm gonna shameless plug here and say that I have some artwork on Tall Tales Told. I have some
That you do.
some short
Awesome
writings
stuff.
of Michael's that I illustrated a couple years ago, maybe.
Yeah,
I should probably come back around and hit that up again. But
yeah, it was fun. The
yeah, it
little
is fun.
poems and then it was like Shel Silverstein, but somebody who could actually illustrate.
Oh my God! Don't you ever badmouth Shel Silverstein. We're out of here.
His drawings had personality, but they were just his personality, and
They were,
he was,
they were.
he was high as hell at the time. But
Oh, for sure. I would love to see somebody be able to make cartoons for Playboy magazine and children's book at the same time now. Parents groups would be up in their arms. It would never happen.
You have new goals. New goals now.
New goals. I've all right. I'm putting it on the list, and I'm not quitting this. I am gonna also plug my comic, The Adventures of Professor Whiskers. It is about a cat scientist who fights dinosaurs, and I will put a link in this video. If you are doing the 100 Days of Comics challenge, let me know how it's going in the comments, or leave your thoughts about the topic of quitting for me and Michael to read over and respond to. Thanks for hanging out with us and listening to us ramble about this, and we will talk to you next time.